Welcome back to another episode of the Briefcase in the Barn, episode 17, a series of the Furiously Curious show with me and Gary, where we talk about real talk about business, Christianity, life, coaching, and more. Show sponsor is Kula. Kula is a design studio, so I used them for my new website, and they were awesome to work with. Jamie and his team there. So they really specialize in brand refreshes and new websites, focus on service-based small businesses, and want to help their brand stand out, but also make sure your website is backlinked so it ranks good on Google and all the other good stuff. So if you're a small business and you've got to have a website and a brand that you set up yourself when you get started, but it's not, ideally where you would want it to be, and it doesn't necessarily reflect a high level of professionalism, they are definitely someone you should worth checking out. So you can see what they did on my website, furiouslycurious.co, or you can check them out, kula.studio. So it's Khula. Just super awesome guys, do really, really good work. So if that's something that you need, definitely check them out. And then also just a small show update. So I'm going to get more, we're going to start doing more segments that we'll use every week. So we got today's segments are going to be Let's Get Political, Book Report, Scoreboard, Words of a Wise Man, and Faith Life. And so there's about 20 different segments that I have listed. So we'll just rotate through them. Some will use more than others. And I'll just see which ones are more popular, which ones go well and which ones don't, and can help make the show better as well. So what do you think about that, Larry?
It makes me uncomfortable. I don't like structure. I don't like it. I didn't think you did either, but actually you're probably more organized than I give you credit for. How was your week?
I like being organized. It clears my mind. Yeah. It was kind of all over the place.
Okay.
So. Yeah. Well, I think we can just get into it. First segment is Let's Get Political. I know you have very opinionated on this topic. I want to talk about Donald Trump winning the election.
Yeah, so by the time this time's recorded, it's already been 9 days.
Yeah.
Well, I predicted
Kamala to win.
Well, yeah, I did. So That's okay. I'm usually wrong on most things. So.
Yeah. Did you pick her just because then you don't have to feel bad about it?
No, I just kind of feel like what happens in a country, and it's happening in Canada, and it's the reason that we have quite left-leaning governments, is that left-leaning governments spend way more than they take in. Never met one that hasn't, never seen one that hasn't. And so it's the same federally in the US, it's the same in Canada. And what happens is you have a government like we've had in Canada for 9 years, that's relatively left-leaning. They've increased the amount of people that are on the government payroll by, I think, 30 or 40%. And I use government services, and they're not 30 or 40% better. So it's they're just hiring more people, creating new jobs. And then what happens is all those people, they're part of a union, and they get an email, and I have a family member that's part of this. They get an email that says who they should vote for, basically, right? Because you're voting for your job now. So that becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy and a bit of a problem. And so even in the U.S., and it's probably way less in the U.S. because they're just not as, government is typically, I think, probably smaller there in some sense. And now some people may correct me that live in the U.S. and think that's BS. But in Canada, we have huge, bureaucracy is just ridiculous. And you can even see the price of a house in Toronto, let's say 30 to 40% of it is pure taxation and cost from government, right? And that is only increasing every day as, So in the U.S., I would have thought, to some degree, I thought that would have an influence. I feel like it had an influence in our recent BC election. I just feel like you have so many people that are working as school teachers, and all good jobs and important things. But at some point, you just have too many, because if you're perpetually spending more than you're taking in, you got deep problems, and it's not sustainable. And it's for sure like that in the U.S. So I had no real strong opinion on it. I just mostly said that.
You didn't care? You don't think it mattered much to you?
I think it matters way less than most people think, in the sense that most people, when they start to talk about a federal election, like in the U.S., the election, they act as if I guess where I struggle with is we know who the king is.
Yeah.
And I do feel like when you talk to a lot of people, it's as if, and granted, on the other side of the political spectrum, people are unhinged because crazy orange man won, whatever. At the end of the day, you know,
Well, I think
world's gonna keep spinning
I think about it in a few different ways, because
Yeah.
I do agree with
Okay.
you that like we have the one king. Like there's
yeah.
the
But it does matter too. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I'm not saying that at all.
no, but that's where I feel the tension is,
Okay.
because
Okay.
so you have like the Israelites when Jesus was around. What did they want? They wanted him to save them from the Romans.
Yeah.
Like that's what's going to make their life better now. And I think that's really easy to do, and think that like, you know, Trump or whoever the leader is and stuff like that is going to make your life better now. And it's all about like just making today better and our world better. And we're forgetting that, hey, we're only here for a blip of time, and we're going to be piecing out soon. And where's our heart actually at? And it's not about building our kingdom. It's about building God's kingdom, or not building our country, but God's world, and reaching people. So I feel that tension of like, hey, let's not like, this isn't now we've arrived sort of feeling and stuff like that. But on the flip side, I think if Kamala would have got in, it would have been devastating for free speech. For
Definitely in the U.S. it would have. Yeah. I feel like, to be honest, and you can read a lot about it online from people that are way smarter than I am, but I do think that for Canada, or even me as a business owner in Canada, it's not great to have Donald Trump elected. I think that, you know, he talks about high tariffs, he talks about USA first. Those type of policies are not necessarily healthy for us, right?
No, but I do think that, like, for example, you know, if free speech would have gone in the last country that really has free speech, it would have been much harder for us as Canadians to have any free speech at all.
That's because we are very,
you know, it's like I remember my teacher in grade 11 said, Miss Terpstra, it was social studies 11.
Great
It was like
teacher.
the only thing I actually really enjoyed was Canada is like a mouse sleeping in bed with an elephant. The elephant flips over, the mouse is going to move a lot. You know, so I think it does make a big difference. You know, even like Elon buying Twitter, like free speech, if that's not there, it makes a big difference. I have this with my family in Holland.
Did you see the meme with the bureaucrats in the U.S. with Elon walking with the sink across the front lawn of the White House?
No.
Okay, that's pretty funny.
But like my family in Holland, they are all like pro Kamala and like anti-Trump, because that's the only thing the media tells them.
Yeah, and he's just not a great guy, right? Like, I mean, and even
But
many people,
but
it's the
what do
lesser of two evils thing, right?
But even that though, like I've met with both Eric and Don, you know, and stuff like that. They're not what the media portrays generally. Like they're average dudes, and you know, and they,
I guess,
like even like Trump, like he said some super crude things. But
that's where I'm coming from.
Let's say someone put a mic on you.
They would
all
hear
the
a lot
time.
of really crude things.
I mean, it's bad enough in this podcast. So
yeah, that's true.
You know, like anybody that's had a mic on them 24/7 the last 10 years.
I'm glad I don't get the comment section that you read them. I don't think I can handle it. I'd get shut down.
But I think another thing is that, like, you know, so many people got vilified that say they supported Trump. They were like racists and bigots and like, you know, how could you support this guy? He's so terrible and stuff like that. And when you vilify a group of people, eventually they're going to like be like, screw you. Like you vilify someone enough, they're going to be like, they're going to turn against you and they're going to like do something about it. And I think they rallied a lot of people that way. And I think you see the same thing with COVID. Like, when everyone was vilified for not getting vaccinated, for example.
Or just viewing things differently, yeah. And you're not, it's mostly ironic to me because those same people preach tolerance and love and acceptance, and it's all BS. They only accept it if they think it their way. I'm like, come on.
It is BS, yeah.
Just be consistent, right? Be consistent.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's a good thing, but I don't think it's like by no means the be all end all. It's just, you know, I think it's going to be good for the economy.
Is it though? He spends a lot too. I had a talk conversation a few days ago with somebody. Like his deficit spending was insane. It was obviously not the same as Biden's, but it was horrible.
Yeah,
like, just look at the U.S. federal debt.
It was. I do agree with that, but I do think it's going to be different this time. Like I think they're Elon thinks he's going to be able to take $2 trillion out of the budget. $2 trillion, you know, or even just like JFK, he's going to be in charge of like eating healthier and stuff like that. The crap that's in food and stuff like that. I don't know. I think it matters.
You think he's going to beat the sugar lobby down?
I think they're going to put a big dent in it. I mean, that's pretty hard to break down those lobbies that are like integrated.
They're so ingrained into US
everything.
culture.
Yeah. And they love their sugar. I mean, I still remember like Sarah Palin like holding up her 1 liter Coke, you know, from McDonald's saying, "Don't take it anyway."
Oh yes. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, 10 years or whatever. Okay, next segment, book report. Gary and I are reading this book called Killjoys, The 7 Deadly Sins. We're going one chapter at a time, which is just one of the 7 deadly sins at a time. So this week,
can I go back to politics?
Pride. Yes.
Sorry, I'm screwing with your segments. The thought that I had, and I mentioned it before the show started, was just and this is kind of like people, politics is a religion for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that because like, and even myself, I'm guilty too. It's just like the amount of listening and intake I'm taking on these topics and talking about it. And we are now, we're feeding into that as we're talking about it. But just the amount of knowledge, like I hung out with some young guys, great guys, like they're not well-versed in a lot of things, but they were very well-versed in this. They knew the whole electoral system. I was like, these guys are in their early 20s, right? And they're just like very knowledgeable on which states, what had to happen. And I'm like, you could just tell that they are taking in a huge amount of content, which there again, it's great to be knowledgeable about it, but it's like, hey, if you were in the Word to that extent, or if you were helping other people to that extent, or there's just a lot of good things that we can use our time for. And we need to, I feel like, especially as Christians, I just think we're really accountable for every minute and what we're doing with it. So I felt,
well, I mean,
that's where my pushback is, because I actually do think it's really important. And I would definitely wouldn't want to come across not feeling that. I just think it's not of utmost importance, right? Like ultimately,
well, the news to a certain degree is it's a sold product, right? They're
and the
they're
person
for
watching,
profit.
and the person watching is the
yeah, that's right. And so if you think about the news, like why is it it's designed for you to come back and click again. It's designed for you to come back and listen more, and it's all stuff that's generally fear. Like, the Bible verse that says, think on what is righteous, think on what is good, think on what is pure. It's pretty hard to take that Bible verse and lay it beside the news and say, like, these match. Like, they don't. But it's like, it's really easy to spend hours and hours there. And I agree that's really just, it's an addiction like anything else, like escape.
Some people follow sports to the nth degree, or some people
take the focus off
whatever
yourself.
the thing is.
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyways, it's actually attached to the book report.
Okay.
Because of pride.
Next section, next segment, book report. Gary and I review and discuss insights from a book that we're reading. This book is 7 Deadly Sins, Killjoys by Marshall Siegel, if you guys want to get it and read along. So next week we'll be doing the next chapter. This week's on pride. I read it and I've highlighted some pieces. You read it partly right before we started here. Anything to say before I read some of these quotes here?
No, go ahead.
Pride, however, can be hard to spot, much less kill. Jonathan Edwards said, pride is the most hidden, secret, and deceitful of all sins. Fighting pride is like fighting a shape shifter. It can appear in forms that look like the polar opposites, building up and tearing down. Here are the 6 interrelated forms: building up, self-exaltation, self-promotion, and self-justification, and tearing down, self-denigration, self-demotion, and self-condemnation. You relate to that?
Yeah. A little further on, I don't know where in there, it talks about kind of stems from idol worship or who you worship. And I feel like, I just feel, I really struggle with pride. And I feel like, and he talks, whoever wrote that piece there, they talk about like self-reliance and just the idea of like how we think we're doing it ourselves all the time. And how ridiculous that is, and how much we control, right? And I guess back to even like the idea of, God's not surprised with who won the election, right? God's not surprised about anything, and I think that we often think, well, if it just doesn't go exactly our way, then the world's it's not going to be okay. No, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like God has a
it's
plan.
Supposed to happen that way.
Yeah, and that's hard. That's like that's hard for people to wrestle with, especially because really awful things happen, right?
Yeah.
So I just feel like pride is something that, it basically you that quote there, it's so insidious, right? It's
Pride's fixation with self can only be countered with humility's forgetfulness of self. Humility is the photonegative of pride.
Yeah, he quotes a famous, I think it was C.S. Lewis, that said, being humble is not thinking less of yourself; it's just thinking about yourself less.
Yeah. And
I just really, that quote, I heard that quote many, many years ago at church, and it's really stuck with me. I feel like there's, it's just by nature, we're selfish, right? And we're self-absorbed. Like it's human nature for sure. And, people that aren't that way are beautiful people, right? People that are just very caring for others, wondering how encouraging other people. And I don't think you're not going to be less proud and by just thinking about yourself less. It's just going to be mostly on what are you focusing on and are you caring for others, right? And that needs to be intentional, and that's hard.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, like, because sometimes people can say, the negative side of pride, which I read earlier, was that like they talk bad about themselves all the time, or like they're, don't want to talk about themselves or any of the other things like that. But that's actually not humility, because your focus is still on yourself. And it's just, the backwards form of pride. And you can tell the difference because joy is missing, because true humility they're joyful people. And so if you're like, sometimes humility can be like, oh, that's a humble person who never talks about himself. But,
they're moping around all the time.
Around stuff like that. That's just pride, and it's actually, they're not humble at all.
Yeah.
And so on to that quote that you just mentioned. In other words, I'm quoting here from the book because he mentions that quote. In other words, humility is fundamentally a form of self-forgetfulness as opposed to pride's self-fixation. And humility's self-forgetfulness has a certain flavor, joy. It's not dour or sour.
Yeah. So I often feel like in working in the trenches with people that are really struggling, even myself back in the day, just like so many people spend so much time exactly that, just thinking about how they're doing. And, it came up a few weeks ago on the podcast, you were talking about how I get out of that. And like, I did it again in the last week. You just go down to the warming center in Chilliwack, right? Or you just, any day of the week, you can go to Ruth and Naomi's and walk around and talk to people. And you just do that for 10, 15 minutes. And you will have a healthier perspective and be more joyful. You just will, even through all that carnage, right?
Yeah.
Because most of us are stuck in our own tough spot, and everybody has tough stuff. That's just part of life, right? Like to varying degrees. And some people even listening to this are probably in really tough spots, but there's still, the perspective does help.
Yeah. Perspective does help.
It does help, right?
So in Corinthians, Paul's writing to the Corinthians and talking to them about pride. And there's a little piece in here that talks about that, and it talks about how Paul got saved, like through this big vision. And he kind of, I'll read the piece here. Paul labored to help the pretentious Corinthians see. He makes this point in a shocking way in 2 Corinthians 12. Paul received stunning visions of a heavenly glory, but surprisingly, he was in danger of becoming conceited. If this happened, he would fall into the trap of becoming like false teachers who were marked by pride and arrogance. Therefore, Paul received an incredibly painful thorn in the flesh in order to keep him humble. Paul testified that he was not humbled by the visions. On the contrary, he needed to be humbled because of the visions. The shocking irony is that these were not visions of how great Paul was. Pride can even take great heavenly visions of God and twist them so that we think we are great for having received them. Pride is so twisted, it can even plagiarize and take credit for anything good, even vivid visions of God's glory. And I thought that was fascinating because admitting that, like, even receiving something, great from God, let's say riches or a vision, or like Paul got, or something else like that.
Very typical that it would quickly be,
becomes about us, I got this thing, and that he, it's never the good things that make us humble. It's the hard things.
What I got out of that was his talk about the actual thorn. And I mean, I've heard many sermons on it. I don't think it says, Paul doesn't say what he's actually struggling with, so nobody knows, right? But I just think it's important for especially Christians to remember, like, Paul wrote a good chunk of the New Testament, right? And this was a man that was obviously really struggling with things. And I just think that we think, as we are on our journey in life, we often think at some point we should arrive and just won't struggle, right? And no, like, he literally wrote the Bible and he was struggling with something, right? And it was obviously a real issue. And I think that because of how we compartmentalize things, and because we are so pretentious and we tend to just think we need to look a certain way in order to be okay with God first, right? Like, look a certain way first, which is so contrary to really what we believe. Yet that's just practically how it plays out in our life, right?
Two more quotes here. I think, so how do we deal with pride? Like, what's the solution to it? Like, how do we fight it? The glory of God and the pride of man will collide at one of two crash sites, hell or the cross. In other words, either will we pay for our sins in hell, or Christ will pay for our sins on the cross. Pick your spot. I don't mean to be an Arminian, but those are the only two places that we can deal with. Because pride ultimately is a worship issue. We cannot think about ourselves less unless we think about something else more. So for our part, we must pray and ask the Spirit to open our eyes to more of God's glory, so that we are ever more in awe of Him and ever less in awe of ourselves. Which I think is just an awesome way to describe it, because that's essentially what it is, right? Are we the most important in our lives, or is it going to be God? And but the beautiful thing is that we know it's ourselves, and God still offers us grace in that spot. Okay, so next week it'll be envy. We'll talk about that if you want to follow along. Next segment, scoreboard. Talking about a recent sporting event or sports topic. We're going to switch it all up. It's going to be all over the place here. Do you follow sports much?
Yeah, too much.
What do you follow?
A bit of NHL hockey, the local hockey team a little bit, because I sponsor it. Yeah. I think it's good to have a hockey team in the community. I think it's not bad for a community to. Yeah. I was very total idol worship. My whole teenage years, went to every single Chiefs game for like 6 or 7 years.
I used to get
serious issue.
I used to get taught if I was, how can you go to a Chiefs game, and if God comes back and you're found at the Chiefs game, like you don't want to be found there.
There's a lot of places you don't want to be found. I wouldn't say I wouldn't worry too much about that one.
So you'll sit down and actually watch the Canucks game, or like you enjoy watching the sport?
Yeah, I like the social aspect of it. I mean, my kids are starting to take a bit of an interest. There again, it's balance, right? Like, and I think, if for me, it's like, hey, if there's something that's more important, which many things are more important, I don't need to watch the Canucks game, right? Like if I have a church event, if I have a family event, I'm not like, well, I can't go to that. I got to stay home to watch the hockey game. Like, it's priorities, right? Yeah. But it's leisure, and it's literally just a fun thing. I mean, the problem is, and this is where people would have a real issue with it, and I get it. So whatever, it's wherever your conscience allows you. Your conscience doesn't need to be somebody else's. Yeah. But like, is it okay that someone gets paid $9 or $10 million to play a sport? I mean, that's what the market gives them. But I think there's probably people that are Christians that would say, hey,
make $300,000 in selling a farm. That's what the market gives them.
If they made that much, I wouldn't be sitting here with you, sunshine. But
I mean, that's the same thing. It's supply and demand, isn't it?
It's supply and demand. Yeah. And that will correct. I think it's more because Dutch people look down on sports so much and they think it's so useless. It's even myself, like as a general rule, I have very little, like, my kids play casually, roller hockey or whatever, but like my kids we're not driving a kid to the rink 4 days a week. And I don't think we ever will. I guess things could change, but I just don't really agree with that. I struggle with that for myself.
What you don't agree with it? What
I feel like at that point, it's such a commitment that, whatever you spend your time on, you're saying is of importance, right? And it's like, there again, like there's families that do that and it totally works in their schedule and they feel that that's great.
Just for you.
For my family with 6 kids, it's like there's not 6 kids going to be getting trucked to four different 4 days a week to a rink. Like, and even now I would say we only have 2 kids, and 3 kids, our 3 oldest are doing something a little bit, piano lessons and horseback riding. And it's already, we feel like
a lot.
You're chauffeuring, right? And so there again, it's different for everybody. I just feel like professional sports,
so we, as a family, the thing we're into is Formula One.
Okay. Why would you be into Formula One?
Why do
you find that fascinating? Do the boys love it?
Boys love it. Nicole loves it.
Do you have a favorite car that you like? Like, is it the blue one or what?
No, it's Red Bull. Red Bull or Ferrari.
Red Bull, Ferrari.
Those are the teams. I just love the team sport of it. So it's 10 teams. They all have a budget of like $200 million. They have to build 2 cars. So there's a big like engineering, like they're competing.
There's only 10 teams?
Yeah.
How many cars are racing in each race?
20.
They all have 2 cars.
All have 2 cars. And so
are there allowed to be more teams?
No.
Why not?
They just want to keep it like that. I think they used to have 22 teams, 11 teams or 12 teams, but they just have it capped at 10 teams. And so it's that.
How do you get as part of those teams?
What do you mean?
It's like those 10 decide who gets to join.
Yeah, there's a board. Yeah, there's a board or whatever else like that. And like Audi just joined, or they bought another team out with something else like that. So there's name switching, moving around and stuff like that. So, but you have like a huge engineering like competition, basically what it comes down to, because they have the top engineering. But then you also have drivers on top of that driving the cars and stuff like that.
What do they get paid if they win a race?
They don't get paid per race wins. They get paid by their team to sign up for their team. So like the best driver gets like $60 million a year, and like the worst drivers get like a couple million a year.
How are they coming up with that much money? Just literally TV rights and people are actually going to watch it?
It's a global sport. It's like they travel the whole world. So they were just in...
So they'd have a race in North
Brazil.
America. They'd have a race.
Yeah. Okay. They're going to go to Las Vegas next. They're almost at the end of the season. But I think it's fascinating because you have like even just like qualifying, which is like they all get a couple times around the track, so he gets the shortest time from first place to 20th place. There's like someone's less than a second. on like, you know,
It's
10
a
kilometer
game
track
of,
or 5 kilometer track, whatever else like that. It's like,
Yeah.
that's just fascinating. Just, yeah.
How close it is.
So that's what we do.
How long does a race last?
2 hours.
Isn't it kind of like the NBA where you can just come in at the last 2 minutes and watch the end of the race?
I mean, there's definitely some races like that are kind of boring, but like this last race was in Brazil, and it was like pouring rain.
Okay.
And so the guy from 17th place, Max Verstappen, got to first place.
Wow.
And he just,
Because he was good at driving
He was in
in.
the
Or did
rain,
he have
yeah.
special
basically
tires?
bigger balls.
Do you have special tires?
Yeah, they have wet tires. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
My kids only want to watch racing if there's car crashes.
No, there's
But
a lot of car
That's because we do the
crashes.
cornfield races, right? So
Oh, okay,
that's
yeah.
their whole perspective of driving is crashing cars.
What's the cornfield races?
From 2016 until 2024 at our farm, we would take 10 acres of field and we turned it into like a big racetrack, and we would buy like, $500 beater cars off Craigslist or Marketplace, and we'd have 10 to 15 cars out there spring and fall and invite the whole community and serve them dinner and have races and race until the last car was running, and that was the winner.
Okay, next segment, we're going to go to faith life, a lesson or thought regarding faith in Christ worth sharing. So I got permission to share this. So a couple weeks ago, as I'm sure you guys have heard, I did the my little sponsor thing. Where
Interested.
text interest, whatever. So a conversation with a bunch of people, and so one guy reached out to me from Oregon, and he said he was interested in doing it, and there's some things he wanted to work on and change and stuff. And I asked him, like, what made you get interested in this in the first place? And he said about a year ago, his faith life was nominal. Wasn't like, I think he was a church going guy, but just wasn't excited about it. But there was he was owns his own business, and there was this job he really wanted that he was bidding on, but he really, really wanted this job. And so he decided to pray about it for 20 minutes a day. Set the timer, pray about it for 20 minutes a day to get this job. Super selfish.
This guy's a Christian or not?
Yeah. Christian guy.
Okay.
And so he started doing that every day for months on end. And he said what started happening was he stopped praying about getting this job, and he just found himself praying about all these other things in his life. And he started really looking forward to his mornings, and he started like hearing from God in the Bible and stuff like that when he was reading it, and just he started realizing things that he needed to change, and like just everything started to change for him. And all he did was just put himself in a position to
Hear God.
Yeah. And just take the time. And it was really encouraging and convicting for me. Convicting because, I mean, I just, pray for a couple minutes at a time, usually 5 minutes, whatever, in the morning, and then throughout the day and stuff like that. But I don't really spend any significant amount of time praying. But I think, if you do, like it's gonna make a difference, and things will change. I think we're too quick to go to like a counselor or a pastor or a friend and stuff like that, and about a lot of these things, and don't talk. We have a direct line of communication with God Almighty. Even if our motives are bad, because sometimes I find myself not praying because I'm like, oh, it's just selfish. It's about me and stuff like that. And no, God's just talking. He already knows.
Yeah.
He already knows
how selfish you are.
Yeah, it's
does.
much worse than we realize. So
yeah,
you just talk to him. And so I thought it was just a super powerful lesson, and I was encouraged by it and wanted to share.
That's awesome.
What do you think? What's prayer life look like for you, and what do you think about it?
Always convicted. Just convicted listening to you share. Because I know better. And I go through periods of doing really well and then doing way better. And like now I'm under the weather, I'm under duress, I'm just under pressure, and I'm not like the most important thing I let go because I'm like, well, I'm just, just book reading the Bible. It's like, hey, am I making that a priority? And not enough lately. So check next week, see if I do better.
Sounds good.
Put the screws to me.
Okay. Last one here. Last segment. Words of a wise man. Reflecting on a biblical proverb from Solomon and talking about it. Proverb is: an employer who hires a fool or a bystander is like an archer who shoots at random.
That's for sure me. Whenever people say, hey, what approach are you taking? I always take the shotgun approach. Like just blast her with buckshot and see what we hit. My wife gets really frustrated. She's like, you need to get more focused. That's how I am, right?
Yeah, but on like what kind of thing? On hiring too?
On everything. Maybe not hiring, no. But like even like generosity or donations, like
just last minute, just give
or just totally off the cuff. Just not enough, like obviously good intent behind it, but just
you pray
be a little more
afterwards that it
focused.
gets blessed rather than beforehand who you should give to.
Or just even who to give to. Like we have finite resources, and the Lord kind of calls us to like, these are our money, steward our money well. Most of us just aren't generous enough, period. So don't be too worried about who you're giving to. It's usually the hard issue for most people listening to this is you're just clinging tightly to your money because you don't feel like you have enough, which is fair. But I mean, I would challenge that.
Yes.
But I think on the front of like shooting like an archer anywhere, what was the first part? Read it.
An employer who hires a fool or a bystander is like an archer who shoots at a random. I thought it was neat, again, that like there's such practical proverbs, or even like just business owners and stuff like that. Like when you're hiring, be intentional.
Yeah. So like one of the best things I ever heard, I used to be on a committee for Farm Credit Canada because I was a young farmer, and I got picked to be on this committee. So we'd meet with the CEO of Farm Credit in Ottawa. And one of the things he said was to hire slowly and fire quickly. And in that same meeting, he said, if you've even thought that you should fire somebody, you probably should have fired them a long time ago, as a general rule. And I think that we're people pleasers. We don't know who we're going to replace them with. We think people are not replaceable. Everybody's replaceable.
Yeah.
And sometimes even if they're not hardly feel replaceable, just to shake up in your business healthier, that's kind of the direction you're supposed to go.
I've heard of some companies actually saying to the managers that need to hire, if that person needs to get fired down the road,
you're fired too.
You're not fired too, but like you need to get written up because you either hired badly or you managed badly, and they put the responsibility on the manager. And I think that's really powerful as well, and I think that's real leadership. Like it's just like you're owning it, like it's you're taking responsibility.
So I really believe in that proverb, and I would say to some degree it handicaps me because I feel like incapable of almost, now this is just my personality anyways, the Beekman trait, like can't make a decision to save my life. But like, I do feel like in those moments with a person, I'm so worried about hiring the wrong person. I'm like, okay, now we don't have anybody. And I've had this a few times. And then I end up panicking because, hey, we got nobody, we got to fill it. So I think there needs to be process, and I need to be like, now I have people even that are walking alongside me that are just kind of like helping me with those, like actually like do plan the interviews. So the interviews happen. So you're not just like, oh, their resume looked pretty good. Yeah, no, they seem like a nice enough person. Like, no, actually ask some questions, see if you're aligned, right?
Yeah.
And what I'm learning, I had a discussion last night with an employee after a meeting, and like I said to this person, like you need to enjoy what you do, like to some degree. And obviously every job and every boss and every person has parts of their life that are just, hey, it's a grind and you just got to do it. Like just based on, we're not going to be that blessed that we just literally only get to do what we want. Yeah. But you should be, if you are perpetually going to work feeling like it's a job, I would really challenge that. I think that most people can find something that they're good at, that they like doing. And I think fear holds people back. They're so fearful of like,
or money,
or needing the check.
They have a job where they're making really good money.
Yeah. I would blow that right up. I just think, boy, life is short. And if you want to really be a blessing to others and be blessed yourself, I feel like you need to be in an environment where you are doing what you, and I mean, I never feel like I work a day in my life, which is a bit of a problem, my wife would say. And that's probably part of my workaholism issue. But I do feel like, I just don't feel like even things that do suck. Like, I shoveled out a cattle trailer the other night. Like, I just feel fortunate to do that. You know what I mean? And I think that, so the hiring thing is definitely an issue for me. I need to hire somebody right now. And
for what? Good advertisement.
Oh, I'm always scared to put it out there, right? Because of all the people that'll reach out to me and say, hey, I'm interested in that. And then I'm such a people pleaser. I can't tell them that it's not a good fit.
Okay, send them to Tim.
Send them to Tim. That actually is true. Reach out to Tim DeVisser. I'm looking for someone to potentially run my farm.
Oh, actually, I okay.
Kyle's already got somebody that he thinks is a great fit.
Anyways.
It might be him, and if it's him, he's not getting hired, so.
Thanks for listening. We are going to keep this conversation going in overtime, where we'll do a couple more segments. There's 2 more segments left. Let's Get Personal, where Gary and I each answer a personal question submitted by the other person. And Family Fiascos, sharing a funny and memorable recent family event. I got a crazy one. So if you want to watch those, head over to Patreon. Link in the description of this video, or go to patreon.com/Furiously Curious. Or you can text the word overtime to 604-703-9045, and I'll send you a direct link to Patreon as well. So we're going to keep chatting. Thanks for listening.
Have a great week.